Hello and welcome to another episode of the Nutanix Weekly Podcast from XenTegra. I'm your host, Phil Sellers. We're kicking off episode number 79. Not bad for a little podcast that could. It's been going for a couple of years. And we're kicking off yet another year, right? I mean, we're already in 2024, which is absolutely wild, right? Joined today with Jaira Cox from Nutanix. Jaira, how are you?
Doing
Happy.
well, Phil. I think we can say Happy New Year. Yeah, first episode of the new year for sure.
Yep. And we've also got Harvey Green, our CEO of XenTegra Gov. Harvey, how are you doing?
Uh, I'm doing pretty well. You kind of put in my head, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can.
Well, maybe that's appropriate. I don't know that I've said this publicly, but I'm pretty well known as a VMware guy. I've spent most of my career on that train, and Harvey's the guy that really changed me over to a different express train on the Nutanix tracks once I got here. This analogy's falling apart in my head, but Harvey's got to take some credit for that. I remember conversations a couple of years ago where you sat me down at lunch and you were like, you really need to take a look at this. This is different than what you knew back in the day, and I'm a believer today, and that's your fault, man.
Nice. Surprised you still remember that.
Yeah, congrats, Harvey, for sure. Yeah, it's some
Yeah.
sort of a analogy of like it's the same train, but you can change up the wheels depending on your specific wheel requirements or something like that.
Oh, here we go. Now we're running with analogies for sure.
Trying to.
It is the
Um,
truth. I had a great conversation with a customer this past week, and we had that conversation. They're VMware based today. They're not exactly sure if they're quite ready for AHV,
yeah,
but that's the great thing about it. They can get started on VMware where they're comfortable, get all the benefits of the hyper-converged storage, and then as they continue to grow out and get more experience with it, they can make that change in the future, and it's easy to do. So it's a great place to be for a customer.
totally. Well, and that migration, spoiler alert, is such a key theme for us, right? Of like nothing is set in stone, right? Things get revisited, layers of the stack get revisited and changed all the time, right? So change is constant, and meeting customers where they are, taking them where they want to go is such a key outcome that we deliver.
Well, you're right. It tees up a great conversation, and so we've got a good one for this episode. We're continuing on the "What If You Could" series. Our last episode was one of these podcasts, and today's blog, Jaira's given us a great one. It's Infrastructure Matters: Making Workload Migrations Efficient and Cost Effective. This one also happens to be written by Mark. Help me with his last name, Jaira.
I call him and his handle internally is Mark TR, which is what I know him as. Um,
That's cheating.
it
Well,
is it is cheating.
so shout out to Mark TR. Sorry that we're having a tough time with your last name, but
but we know our
he's
strengths.
yeah. Well,
Yes.
and it's a great series. I've enjoyed reading these as they come out. Um, you know, we a lot of times think about what we're doing, and it's easy to get our blinders on, right? It's easy to work in our one environment, or work in what we know and not think about what if. And so I love this series because it broadens our horizon a little bit and helps us to think about other things that we could do. And so workload migration, man, I've shared a little bit of my history on this podcast, but I worked for a company that had acquired 50 other companies in 20 years. So it's an awful lot of working through integrations and workload migrations and email systems and all that kind of stuff. So, this is really near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time doing workload migration. So, um,
Gosh, that's like what, one every 4 or 5 months. ish.
Yeah. And some of them were downright huge.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure they weren't all the same size.
Yeah. And varying different degrees of integration that we had to do. So, um, you know, this is something that we do well as XenTegra too. We help customers kind of work through this. Whether they're getting eviction notice from their data center because it's closing down, or whether they're choosing to migrate to cloud native, hyperscale cloud, and be more proactive in it. We work across the entire uh, horizon of all the different things that our customers may need. So, this series talking about the benefits of multi-cloud platform it is great. So as we kind of kick off, what is the main idea here that we want to kind of tackle? Jaira, I'll kick it over to you first.
Yeah, well, and I'll steal a page out of the blog post here, which reminds us that the last article, if you missed that one, and our commentary on it, right, was about why multi-cloud and how it delivers kind of more efficiency, more cost effectiveness, that helps our customers think and act and operate more like a cloud provider, which means for the business, right, we get more capabilities for like native application development, faster deployments, better and more thorough management. And so then that's all the if you missed it, right, go back and catch that. And then this one's going to focus more about, hey, look, what's the reality here, right? What are the challenges of managing and migrating applications across these parts of these components of hybrid multi-cloud, right? As we help our customers make their cloud stretch to wherever it needs to, on-prem, edge, data center, colo, and public cloud, as we help that become the, insert customer name here, right? The Contoso cloud, then what does that look like to actually have to then, do those migrations and manage the applications across those environments?
Well, what is, I mean, from your perspective, what is the main advantage that you gain by having that common platform?
Um, Geez, I mean, advantage is plural, right? Is the easy answer. Everything from security to agility. Like when you get a notification that one part of your cloud has to physically relocate, right? And maybe possibly due to like an eviction notice, like you said, Phil. What do I do there, right? How do I respond to that and say yes to the business while acknowledging the physical constraint there that's been introduced? Security is a huge one, right? Like what if deploying to say 5 different availability zones within my corporate cloud meant one unified security posture and security validation workflow, not 5, right? So that I know however I've deployed this application, this workload, securing it, monitoring it, baselining it has an identical, not even similar, but like identical look and feel.
Well, Harvey, I'll ask you. The last time we were together, we talked about multi-cloud versus multiple clouds,
Yes.
and the delineation between those two things. It really kind of comes down to strategy, doesn't it?
It does. As you were kind of going through the setup for this before we really got into it, I was kind of sitting and thinking what workloads, if any, I could think of that were still in the same place as they were when I first was introduced to it.
Mm.
And I couldn't come up with one. So, I mean, migration should always be a part of your strategy. It should always be something you're looking at. And I mean, you guys both already know that's one of the reasons that I look at and like Nutanix so much is because you've got so many options when it comes to migrating. Um, to your point, Phil, that can be multiple clouds, that could be multi-cloud, um, that could be, just making sure you've got the predictability from one place to the other. You even if it's on-prem and maybe you're just upgrading or moving to a different cluster, you've got that predictability in between, along with everything else that Jair was just talking about with security and being able to take care of. I mean, really, just take care of that workload completely on its own with itself and or with other workloads, just kind of making it easy on yourself.
Well, and not every customer, right? Not every customer's journey ends the exact same destination. Not everyone needs the exact same kind of maturity or capabilities, I guess. We often talk about, and very few people get to the sort of nirvana end state of I can get like a granular accounting on like cost governance on like a per resource consumption, even on my hybrid multi-cloud. We can help you get there or get you very, very close to it. But not every customer takes all the steps to get all the way there. A similar one though,
Right.
that I can picture, staying in the vein of like migration, is like we talk about migration that helps administrators and resource owners have capabilities and make decisions and move stuff when they need to. But I can picture that sort of same sort of like nirvana tier end state maturity is really actually self-service migrations, right? The owner chooses, I'm moving from AZ1 to AZ2 for this certain performance benefit or cost benefit or security benefit. That ultimately, if I really do my job all the way correctly, I as an admin or contributor to the platform team don't really affect. I see the migration happening because the application owner's chosen it. But I didn't even really have to like tilt them a certain direction to be like, hey, we're getting out of this data center. They almost didn't really notice in some ways.
So I want to pick at that just a little bit more, because I see it both ways. I see both the application owner making that choice, maybe based upon price, based upon their budget, that sort of thing. But I also see the platform team making that choice independent of the application owner, based on their criteria. Maybe it's security related, or maybe it's based on something that they've created as far as an agreement or things like that with a particular cloud provider. So I kind of see, you have this API between teams now where your infrastructure is sitting in there and it can be flexible and move the resources for you based on whatever that criteria is. If it's something the application owner needs, or if it's something that your platform team actually needs, both can get what they need out of the platform and move it independently. So I do love that idea. Harvey, I'm going to go back and ask you another question because I think you hit on something really, really big. You're talking about the workloads that you can't think of a workload that's still in the same location that it was, 5 years ago.
Right.
The change of capabilities, and Mark writes about this. I'll actually back up for just a quick second. In the blog post here, Mark's talking about the Enterprise Cloud Index study. It's been commissioned by Nutanix, had about 1,400 respondents this year. And some of the things that came out of it, I think, go very, very well with what Harvey's saying here. Third paragraph down, migrating applications and data where you want them allows you to capitalize on unique features, prices, and performance capabilities of different cloud providers. I couldn't say it better, so I just needed to read it, right? But we're living in that fast-paced thing, and especially when we talk about bullet number 2, AI and machine learning. That is a fast changing landscape if there ever was one in our industry, right? How beneficial is it for a company to be able to relocate their workloads close to those native services, Harvey?
I mean, extremely. We're at the point, as you're pointing out, where we have tools at our disposal that weren't even something we were thinking about a few years back. And to be able to, take a workload that has this humongous amount of data that you used to have to search through and, do all of these fancy tricks to try to get some information out of having, all of it together. Now you've got something that will go and do that work for you, and just bring you back the insights, just bring you back, hey, if you just do this the way that you were doing it this time versus the way that you do it now, you'll have this much more efficiency. Like all of these things that, it would take us, days, months, years to figure out. Now it's just being handed to us in seconds. And that's a huge deal. And if you're not, and if your company is not in a place where those services are available to you, now all of a sudden you have this path to make that happen. And you can just migrate it from this place to the other place that has the services. And then bam, now you can start taking advantage of it. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, I call that data gravity, right? You want to have that data close to those services. Um, as we're
Right.
kind of going through here, Jaira, that there's three more big reasons, top reasons identified that moving different locations is important to customers. Do you want to cover off those or talk about maybe the security posture or things like that?
Totally, right? So keeping with how we teed it up, right? Other triggers for change, right? Like I have to do something because of why. So the article calls out, really the article, which is referring to our Cloud Index survey, actually study as well, highlights, of course, security posture, right? So like I must be in a certain environment or something that is accredited in a certain way, or single tenant hardware, or whatever the letter of the law says you have to do to meet certain regulatory requirements. Harvey touched on already, like adjacency to some kind of cloud service, right? A common one today as we record this would be like AI, right? I want to be closer to some state of the art AI offering, which gives me a competitive business advantage. Therefore, I need to get close to where that is to be able to use it more effectively. Um, Data access speeds, right? Because of course, data does have gravity. Latency is still a thing that, so far no one's really managed to change the laws of physics. So putting certain things together just makes more and more and more sense.
I'm working on
Right. It's in the queue. It's in the queue, right? Waiting on a business justification. And then the last one we call it here is gain better control of the application, right? Which is such a neat phrase, right? To picture, you know, it's appropriately agnostic, right? Because like who gets more control? The application owner, platform team, both security team, visibility, insights, governance. It's wonderfully multidimensional there.
Yeah, Mark goes on to say 99% of the surveyed organizations had moved an application, one or more applications, to different IT infrastructure in the past year. Does it surprise you that it's not 100%, Harvey?
I am surprised it is as high as 99% in the past year. I mean, like I told you, I was trying to figure out if I could think of one that has been sitting in the same place since the first time that I saw it, and I couldn't come up with one, which is very good. But at the same time, I would not have guessed 99% in the past year. That
Yeah.
seems higher than I thought it would have been.
I think I'm with you,
Um,
Philip. Like out of the giant pile of data that fed this report based on the survey, it's like if you said no, I moved no apps last year, like I have so many questions. I want to learn so much more about your business.
well, and so right. So that's part of what I was looking at too, is how accurate is this, not from the sake of the actual survey, but who is gonna say no? Apparently somebody was that guy, right? Being honest, which is great. But in general, who's gonna say no?
Yeah, I mean, I've encountered organizations over my career, walking in blind into a new environment, and it's running on old software, old infrastructure. They certainly exist, but
Oh
with the
yeah.
threats that we have today, I do think that's a changing thing. And so I'm happy to see 99% of
Me too.
organizations have
Yeah.
moved infrastructure, because that to me says they're doing the right things. They're moving off of older operating systems. They're upgrading the infrastructure itself. They're upgrading the hypervisor. All of those things that innately make you a little more secure by staying current.
I'm laughing because as you go through that list, I kind of look back at it and I'm thinking with my IT hat on, and I'm just kind of saying, well, they didn't say all of that. Um,
Yeah, and I also think back to early career days and stuff, and walking in. I remember walking into a manufacturing facility, and they told me what the uptime of their and I think it was well, it wasn't an I-Series, an AS400 back in those days. But I remember them telling me
yes.
how proud they were of the uptime on that system. And it was, nearly 2 years, I think, that the system had been up. But yeah, I mean, if I walk in and see a server that's been up nonstop for 2 years, I has questions just like Jira.
There was, I think my best anecdote there was walking into a hospital system that had a VM with a snapshot older than my oldest child. And I
Oh,
was like,
yeah,
let's have a little chat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I will
again,
say the AS400 was a different machine and in
Different.
a different time,
Yep.
agreed.
but yes.
But back to your point, right? Those are the things. The practices change as the applications evolve, as the new technology forces us, and the new risks force us into new
Yeah,
things,
that's the
right?
big one.
So let's talk about the challenges, because organizations also agreed, 80%, 86% of organizations agreed that moving applications can be complex and costly. So what are the challenges? Jaira, do you want to take that?
Totally. And the one nugget that I love, I incorporate this into a lot of my talk tracks, right? Is how 85% of workload placements are business owners forecast will be suboptimal by 2027, which is nebulous and I read that fast. What does it mean? It means so it's 2024 now. Welcome to 2024. So in 3 years, 85 out of 100 applications will be where they shouldn't be, right? Or
Mm,
not be where they ought to be.
mm,
That's kind of wild, right? Like that's just what the
It
numbers
is.
say, right? So how do you fix that, right? Organizationally, you have to increase your throughput for change, right? To be able to do it more often, more faster for reasons. Right. So then picking up the ball where you passed it to me, Phil. So like some of those reasons can include, of course, licensing cost, right? When I move some things from A to B, right, crossing certain kinds of thresholds or tenancy boundaries or locations, right? Licensing gets revisited and gets changed, right? So optimizing for licensing, optimizing for the workload, right? And one of the ways that the article teased this up was that most apps are not a single VM, right? Even if they are, even that can have its own complexities. But if you have a multi VM app, right, then of course one thing that we really see in every cloud is now you have lots of VMs that are all at the mercy of or dictated by your cloud provider for sizing, right? Like, oh, you get this instance
Yes.
size. We need more of something, then you get a bigger instance across all these various dimensions, times now number of VMs that are in that app, not even just a single one. Interoperability, right? Because of course, software going to software. So you've got versioning stuff, you've got compliance and certifications. And some things you manage, some things might be a managed service, right? So things that get dictated to you. I'm sure we all see this probably a couple times a week, is that ensuring continuity, right? Backup and disaster recovery, that, oh, surprise, like doesn't go away when I move stuff to, like, say, the cloud or to someone else's computer. I like to tell customers,
Wait, you mean the cloud doesn't back it up for me automatically?
so this is one of the simplest things I ever say, and it's got to sound so dumb to some people, but I'm like, if you would get yelled at when this is down, that still needs a backup, right? And no one cares. No one cares if it's in your data center or the cloud or somebody else's. Like, who gets yelled at about it? Oh, you do? Okay, great. So how are you going to solve for backup and recovery for this application, right?
I like that.
I do
That
too.
hits home.
You can tell what I optimized for when I was a sysadmin. Um,
Well, and let's underscore that a little bit more, because I don't think we can underline this too much. I mean, there's so much misconception out there in the industry about backups when it comes to cloud services, and the assumption that the provider's doing it for you. But if you believe that, Google shared responsibility model, and then insert your vendor name,
yep.
and every cloud provider, whether it's a SaaS provider or whether it's an infrastructure provider or hyperscaler, they all have a shared responsibility model. And uh, the data, your data, is your responsibility. And so you absolutely should be looking at data protection for your SaaS applications and for your infrastructure running on a hyperscaler. Um, that is probably the number one misconception that I run into talking to folks, is that they don't understand they're responsible for their own data.
100%.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, if you don't have two of it in the cloud, you don't have it in the cloud. It's not there. I mean, ultimately, the things that you love about the cloud, the cloud air quotes. The things that you love about the cloud is that, it's the hardware is their responsibility. Well, by golly, it is their responsibility. So if one server goes down, yes, they absolutely will put you on another one. But if your data was living on that particular one that went down and you don't have another copy, well, by golly, they gave you another one without your data on it.
Yeah. The article's
So there you
wonderfully,
go.
yeah, yeah. The article's wonderfully like sort of focusing on the platform and capabilities and not going into specific products. But it's 100% when I educate customers about our NC2 offering of running Nutanix in public cloud. I'm like, why do you want this? Well, one reason is because it's the easiest way to get disaster recovery for stuff that's in public cloud.
Mhm.
And that
Yes.
launches this whole other can of worms of like, wait, what do you mean I need DR in the cloud? And I'm like, let's keep talking, like,
Yes, please.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the last one that we call out here, right, is of course, security issues, right? And that can come from anything from failure to implement a security policy to a migration that then changes what environmentally can I do to program security into the deployment, right? Maybe, in traditional cloud native, when I deploy an AMI, of course I can put ACLs into that network in the cloud natively. If I brought that onto my, say, traditional stack of like a hypervisor and a storage array on-prem, well, that network control couldn't follow it on-prem, right? But how would I run an environment where it could move either direction from here to cloud or cloud back to here and maintain that same security posture and know that I don't introduce a gap when I do that migration, right? So security can also be another huge driver there.
Yeah. And, as I've seen novice teams go into cloud, one of the things I've seen is, making it work, breaking security, right? So, something as simple as I need to be able to RDP to this machine. I'm going to open RDP to the world. Well, what have you actually done, right? You've opened up a huge doorway, but you were just trying to get the job done at the end of the day. So, it's this balance that has to be set. There's different ways to operate when you start talking about cloud native and migrating to hyperscale. And you can largely avoid some of those with a platform like NC2. You get to operate the same way. It's very portable. Everything is there. So the next question in the article: what if you could automate your workload placement across anywhere across your infrastructure?
Well,
That
I
is
would even go
quite
just one step further, right? To like, could I automate all these aspects we've talked about anywhere? Totally. But if I have 5 environments, that's 5 different solves, right? Compared to what if you could automate all of this anywhere in your across your infrastructure once, right?
Mm.
That's the real efficiency of like doing more with less, helping move the business forward, right? Versus, constantly keeping the lights on. That I think is such a differentiator.
Well, and to call back to the last episode we talked about, that's the difference between multiple clouds and a multi-cloud strategy, right?
Yeah.
Now you're talking about having a multi-cloud strategy where you have the same set of common platform tools that you have flexibility where you deploy. And that's the strategy that's the end game that we really want to see for customers is to operate the same way regardless of where that environment lives. So
Totally.
let's
I kind of
talk a
look
little
at
bit about
this
that.
as
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was going to say, I kind of look at this as learning to drive. Once you learn how to drive, there are a lot of things that you'll be able to now drive. Learning how to drive a car means, okay, now you can drive an SUV. Maybe you can translate that into being able to drive a bus with some modifications. But being able to take that knowledge that works in one place and apply it somewhere else is huge for an organization, and not having to relearn how to do it every single time a workload has to move from one place to the other. That can cause a lot of stress and strain, not only on IT but on the business too, as IT learns how to drive again.
It's
So
well said.
I'll tee up a softball for you, hopefully, Jaira. Why can Nutanix do this? What is Nutanix secret sauce, and why can it help us that way?
I think you told me if I'm landing on the right answer that I should give here. I think it's the portability of the platform that lends itself to portability of the apps, right? The
Yeah.
fact that we can run one software stack anywhere, and even like kind of how I opened here, right? Like even choice of hypervisor can actually contribute to basically the exact same stack. Like you can get that stack and get a lot of those outcomes almost any which way you want to. Pick your favorite deployment model there. Or run both or migrate from one to the other. It's the fact that you can run the same Nutanix stack in all these locations, right? In a partner colo, in a bring your own sheet metal colo in the cloud, in your data center at the edge, and have a common operating model, right? That really lets you solve for these things kind of one time and then deploy anywhere that you want to.
So I totally agree with you, and
That
that
I
was
do.
the
Good.
question. That was the answer I was looking for. And the one thing, and you know me, so the word I'm going to use is platform, right?
Yeah.
When I talk about Nutanix, I talk about platform, and so it's the additional tools that add value, not just the core software, but the automation like Calm, being able to talk to the same APIs, being able to automate everything across all those locations because it is that same software. And that is it. I mean, we've said for years the magic's in the software, right? And this is the manifestation of that. As a strategy. Now we can actually take that and use that strategically within our organizations.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you mentioned Calm. I'd be remiss to not say now called self-service, and that can of course feed your ServiceNow practice. If you have a strong ServiceNow partner helping you operationalize that kind of practice. Now launching a new data center is a new value for a radio button on your deployment workflow, and it can be that simple.
And again, you were talking about that self-service for the application owner, front-ending it with something like ServiceNow. We add that into the application catalog. The user goes in, they order up the 12 application servers that they need. It could even have a pre-installation of the application just, through a radio checkbox, and it automates all that on the back end. And what I love about that is I know it's not just painting a perfect Nirvana picture. You mentioned earlier that we never quite get to Nirvana sometimes in our industry, Jira. It's
Or
true.
we invent a new layer once we get there.
Yeah, once we get it's the never-ending story because it keeps going and going. We keep writing new chapters, but it's one of those things where I've seen that. I've got a customer who's doing self-service or Calm automations around so many different layers. They're using Nutanix as an enabling layer against other services in their data center, and then ServiceNow front-ending it and it's there. It's really happening. Like I don't want listeners to think we're painting a picture that's not reality today, because
Right.
I'm seeing it with our customers. I've had great success doing the same sort of strategy in past lives. Like this is something you can actually do today. It's not just a neat idea. You can actually benefit from this.
Oh,
Uh,
totally. I was talking to a customer that said, like we'd need to see strong value out of Nutanix for us to really consider it. It'd have to, of course, not just deploy VMs because we can do that today, but show me how you would automate my security deployment lifecycling. Of course, like even lower level, right? Show me the IPAM integration to, reserve an IP address and do all the DNS, and then in guest plug into our authentication system, right, to put the right tokens on the box. And we came back and said, great, here's the demo. Do you want to see all these things? Here they are. What's our real next step
right.
together here? So,
Yeah. Yeah, this is deliverable. This is shipping.
yep.
This isn't vaporware. We talked a little bit before we kicked off about vaporware. This is the real deal. This is here today. Um, Harvey, I've got a question for you as we kind of go towards the last section here. When's the last time you talked to a customer about refactoring their applications for cloud? And what was the estimated amount of time it was going to take them?
Normally, when you have that conversation, you get back the starting estimate of, oh no, we could never do that. It's like it's not even in numbers. It's we could never do that. And it's like, well, okay, You can, but let's talk about why you think it's going to be this hard. Or let's talk about, what the mitigating factors are, what's in your way. Ultimately, having that conversation is very much a starter for setting up the rest of it. And ultimately it's hard to start that conversation because that brings back up, some of those skeletons in the closet that were hidden back there for years, because at the very beginning of this process, to actually have something to refactor, these questions were asked, and decisions were made, and sometimes those decisions make sense. Sometimes they were because of preferences or because of a person or something very specific that's not there anymore. It's very much a conversation that starts way back when. And I think that is probably the hardest piece of having that conversation, more so than coming up with an actual cost, is coming up with why do we have to go pull that out of the closet again?
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned Never Ending Story a couple minutes ago, and I've been distracted ever since then by this picture of a big dog in my head, and I didn't even watch the movie like that.
So
Why'd
funny
you bring
story.
that up, Phil?
Well, funny story there. I watched it usually last day of, school for years and years. And I truly thought it was the never ending movie too, because I never saw the end of it. I always ended the class day before we saw the end. So I maybe have seen
I
the end
believe that was
once.
on purpose, Phil.
So you're exactly right. It takes an incredible amount of time and energy to refactor, and most organizations just don't have the gumption to do it. The statistic shared here is with Nutanix, you can migrate workloads to the cloud 60% faster than refactoring. Jaira, we're going to have customers out there, maybe people listening, who say, I don't understand why I need to refactor. Why is that a thing? And what would you say to them?
So I would say this is very simplistic, right? But basically, in any given customer, you've got two categories of apps. You've got apps that you can refactor and apps that you can't, right? And every customer is going to be different. Sometimes that customer is 0 and 100, or 90-10, 50-50, or 10-90 the other way around. Just depends. Some customers still write lots of their own code. Some write none, right? Both are totally valid, right? It's all about that gets into picking the right applications that power your business and the economics thereof. But with whatever blend you've got, right, the common wisdom, right, and even the cloud providers will tell you this, is lifting and shifting your VMs is not the right selection if you care about the cost, right? So if you have at all economic constraints or considerations, if you have a budget, then lifting and shifting your VMs from wherever they live today into the cloud unchanged is not the simplest way to go, not the cheapest way to go, right? So then some customers we meet get in a little bit of a paralysis of, well, I want to get to cloud. I need to get to cloud as a OpEx model with more agility, stop operating a data center, but I can't with my legacy apps. And that's the biggest thing we unblock. We help customers in every kind of bucket there, right? If you have refactorable autonomy over your code that runs your business, then great. Of course, we also are a platform that runs containerized and native applications like that. That's great. We can help you in any of these availability zones, your cloud, colo, partner data center, or the cloud itself and at the edge.
Yeah.
But for these apps that are like, oh, we could never do that, like to Harvey's point, well then great. Don't you want to move them to cloud in a more efficient manner, right? So the big thing there is, of course, move faster, because we're not going to, you don't have to wait for refactoring time, but also just even the time to migrate them, right? Like you could hear this today and have a Nutanix cluster in the cloud. If you started at the beginning of the podcast, you could have a cluster in the cloud by the end of this podcast and be shipping your data up to it, right? We actually have this is the thing I wanted to end my portion on. We have a new test drive out that actually shows Nutanix move in a lab environment and really shows you can go get hands-on with what's that process look like to pick up any application and any VM anywhere and move it to Nutanix anywhere, right, on any Nutanix platform. And you can really get hands-on with that tooling and process that we give to you, of course, for free. You can do it today, right? So go to Nutanix Test Drive, find the one on migration and Nutanix Move, and kind of like let yourself prove to yourself that this is a reality.
So Harvey, when you
I
think
think
about
that hits on. Oh, sorry. I think that hits on one more thing that I've had conversations about before. When you start talking about refactoring for the cloud, you do have the option in between of refactoring and relocating to the cloud with Nutanix, and then spending the amount of time to refactor it without the gun to your head, the proverbial gun to your head, because ultimately that gives you a lot more flexibility. You've got the application relocated to a place where it is safe, where it is serviceable, that maintenance can still be done to it, things like that. And now you've kind of given yourself a lot more time to refactor it correctly, so that you don't have to worry about something happening in between, or having to move before you're ready, and then having to pay for it afterwards in the many ways that you would have to pay for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about some of those impossible apps that you mentioned, Harvey. I know in talking with other customers that sometimes they don't have high availability built into their apps. And so
Right.
relocating one of those to the cloud is a recipe for disaster. Your SLAs are lower for a virtual machine, a
Yes.
single virtual machine in the cloud. And that's something
Yes.
people don't often they're not often told. But the availability on a Nutanix cluster is going to be just as high as if that that was sitting in your data center. And so that's another benefit in some of those impossible apps. We're able to get the same SLAs from a Nutanix cluster in the cloud as we could get inside your data center. So it's not only that stopgap while you refactor, it's also the place where those impossible apps can live long term until you can get rid of them or replace them with something new.
Yes. All standard disclaimers still apply. You still want another copy of your data. You still want another copy of that VM. You still want a backup and recovery plan. Blah, 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 blah. I think you get the point.
Yeah, all
I'm
best
going to start talking
practices
all
still
quick like the
apply.
radio commercials at the end.
We'll get the micro machines guy over here so that he can do the
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's again, we're talking about different places and different layers of resiliency, but there's a lot of benefits. And again, you get to also get that data close to the cloud native services you're trying to find business value using. So I know working with app dev teams, they don't have a lot of patience for us infrastructure guys. Taking our time moving things around. They just want to be able to write code and extract business and complete the project they're working on. So being able to get, our traditional workloads and data next to what they're writing against is a huge win for everyone.
I just want it to work.
I just want it to work. That's what we're fighting all the time. Um, I guess, one more round. Jaira, what would you say, closing remarks, you want the main takeaway from today to be?
If you don't remember anything else, remember that Nutanix as a platform helps make those migrations easy. And we'd love to show you just how easy that can be.
Harvey, what would you say is your key takeaway?
I mean, ultimately, and this is, I guess, I'm trying to think of a better way to say it, but I can't think of a better way to say it right this second. I mean, ultimately, what Jaira said is correct. It is all about the platform. And, I used to tell people this is to get from where you are to Nutanix is, the last time you have to plan for a hard migration. Everything else is just move it here. You just move it here. You move it here. You move it there.
Yeah.
Let's go get the last hard one done together.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And for me, I think it's all about the data. That's the true value to the business at the end of the day is what's in that data and what can we do with it um, to make us more effective as a business, right? Um, that is powered by mobility and choice. And you get those things with the Nutanix platform. You can run it anywhere. And if AWS comes out with that next whiz bang AI, generative AI platform, you can move it right over there into their data center. When
Absolutely.
Microsoft one ups them, you can move it back. When NVIDIA has something, you can move it to Equinix near NVIDIA. You have choice at the end of the day,
Yes.
which is a huge thing.
The
But
listeners can't see me, but I'm nodding profusely.
Yeah, no, full agreement here as well, right? Like we all have to spend our days thinking about what's the future hold and what's the right way to guide our customers. One thing I wouldn't want to bet a single dollar on is like which cloud or which provider, which environment gets AI the most right the fastest.
yeah.
And I think it's such a jump ball right now, right? That ability to stay agile and move to where that's going to land is so key.
Well, and I
Yeah, I
think
mean, ultimately, last thing I guess I'll say is, again, going back to my reference of trying to think about a workload that has stayed the same place for this long, and I couldn't think of one. So that means moving your workloads is inevitable.
mm,
And if moving your workloads is inevitable, then you better get the tool that helps you move it the easiest, the fastest, and the most predictability with success.
yeah,
Yeah, I
That would
mean,
be
that
Nutanix.
sums it up
yeah,
very nicely. Yeah. So, guys, I appreciate the conversation as always. This was a great discussion. You know, I want to thank you guys for carving out a little bit of time listening to the podcast, but these guys for contributing and spending some time sharing the knowledge. At XenTegra, we try to do these podcasts with context. We try to take what's written on the page, what's written in the blog post, and add the real world to it, add the context. So, guys, I appreciate you adding your context today. And for everyone listening, we appreciate the time and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a
Absolutely.
great
And
day.
you got the never ending story song in my head, just so you know. It's your fault.
thank you both.